So you're thinking of walking the Camino. I have a question for you. Is the Camino really for you? That's what we're going to talk about coming up this week. So it's not supposed to be some sort of smart-ass question, but it's a question that comes up a lot online because people walk the Camino for so many different reasons. And it's really appealing. You know, you've probably heard from friends what a wonderful time they had. You may have seen that movie by Martin Sheen, The Way, which personally I think was tremendous. A lot of people don't like it, sort of Camino aficionados. But however you've heard of it, it's an immensely appealing thing to do. And I suppose I just want to bounce around what your motivations might be to help you understand whether it's going to be a good fit for you or not. So as with all of these videos, this is just my personal take on it. So you know, by all means chip in below if you disagree, if you have other views or whatever, or if you have questions. So I suppose the fundamental question I would be asking of you is, you know, will it provide you with what you're seeking? And you're probably not going to know that until you walk it, but here's a few things to think about. You might be motivated to walk the Camino because you love hiking. And I know particularly in North America, you know, these ultra long distance hikes, the Pacific Crest Trail, the Appalachian Trail, those sort of things, you know, are quite a big thing. If that's your thing, will you enjoy the Camino? Yes and no. I haven't walked those, but I've studied them a lot, watched lots of YouTube channels on it. It's a pretty different experience, I think. The Caminos are not really wilderness hiking. You're not carrying tents and cooking stuff and all the rest of it. It's not really about sort of personal endurance. I know a lot of thru hikers have walked the Camino and enjoyed it. Some have walked it and not enjoyed it. Personally, do I love hiking? No. So this will give you an insight maybe into what the Camino is and isn't. I don't really hike at all at home. I suppose if I lived in a beautiful sort of area with forests and, you know, wonderful landscapes, I might. I occasionally sort of go out bushwalking, as we call it in Australia. Not a lot though. And I think because I don't really want to walk the same trails all the time. And walking along Camino for me is about, you know, every day being new and fresh. You know, having said that, I've walked the same one 3 times, so I'm kind of arguing against myself here. But if you're a hiker, you might enjoy the Camino if you enjoy multi-day hikes. But you are passing through towns and villages. You will have potentially, you know, a lot of other pilgrims around you. It's not really a wilderness hike. So if hiking is your motivation, think about that a little bit. More, I guess, you know, I've spoken to dozens of people whilst on Camino and dozens online. And I think the overwhelming reason that many people walk the Camino is just for a break. That's certainly why I did it. I'd been working my butt off for probably close on 40 years. And I just kind of got to the point where I thought, oh, I just got to get off this treadmill. You know, there's got to be more to life. And that was in 2015 when I walked my first Camino. And just the idea of unplugging, being alone, you know, it was a bit of an adventure. But it was something for me to just have a break from the routine and from my working life. You know, I'd work crazy hours, bit of a workaholic. And it took me 18 months of planning to kind of replan my work to be able to do it, because I run a business, so I had to kind of pre-warn everybody in the business that this was going to happen. I was going to be away for 2 months, and they stepped up marvelously, and so I've done it a couple of times since. A lot of people, I think, walk for that reason. They want a break from something. It could be, you know, there's been a relationship breakdown, maybe there's been some trauma in their lives. Yeah, you know, maybe like me, they were sort of reaching burnout in work, and it's kind of just, I just want to switch off the world for a bit and have some peace and think. So for that, it's awesome. It's the place to be. And that's why I'm drawn back to it. That's why I'm hoping to go on an even longer one next year. So for that sort of break from the world, it's brilliant. The next reason I sort of had on my list here was to think and refocus and prioritize and all those sorts of things. And that I found on my first Camino was an amazing experience, because I've often talked about the phases of the Camino, how the first bit is really getting a handle on the physical elements, and then when you're comfortable with that, there's a bit of an emotional barrier to get through, and why am I here and what am I doing? And once you get through that, it's almost like sort of a Zen state where things just fall away, your mind becomes clearer. It's like a walking meditation to me. And yeah, you kind of start questioning your purpose, your why is the favourite term these days, what's important to you. I pondered that question on my first Camino for probably 3 or 4 weeks, and I went round and round, not in any sort of stressful kind of way, but just reflecting. And I realised that I had walked that first Camino seeking answers. And I think after the first week, I realised I didn't even know what the question was. So then I searched for the question. It was a bit like that, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. What's the question they want the answer to? What's the meaning of life, the universe, and everything? And after 1 million years of computer programming, the answer is 47, I think. So yeah, for that thinking time, reflection, I have never done anything as effective as the Camino. It really is good. The other reason I've got next is healing, and I suppose it's part of that as well. A lot of people I have met on the Camino were seeking some form of healing, maybe trauma in their lives, or relationship breakups, or health issues, and it's a wonderful place for that. There's an immense sense of community, particularly on the more busy Caminos, and I suppose coupled with being out in nature all day, having the day-to-day sort of decisions and dramas taken away from you, or having left those behind, it can be an extremely healing experience as well. And then probably the last one, and the most obvious one, is if you're seeking some sort of religious or spiritual experience. How many people walk the Camino these days for religious reasons? I should have looked at the stats prior to doing this video, but I'll have a look afterwards and put a comment down below. I think it's about 50%, who turn up at the pilgrim's office in Santiago, and when they're asked their reason for walking, I think about 50% say for religious reasons. For me, the first one was very much about reflection and, questioning what was going on in my life, but it became a very spiritual experience. And I've mentioned this on a couple of videos, and I'm not generally a religious person. I don't go to church. I don't follow any particular faith, although I guess I'd call myself a Christian. But I found being in that environment, walking through villages with churches that are hundreds of years old, walking on paths that pilgrims have walked on for 1,000 years, walking along Roman roads, and I know this is going to sound really woo-woo. If you've walked a Camino, you'll know what I mean, but some of those long Roman roads, you almost sense the energy of millions of pilgrims having walked before you, and legions of Roman soldiers. You really do feel a sense of that. So if you have an ounce of religious feeling or spirituality about you, that is going to get enhanced, I think, particularly on the Camino Frances, which because there's a lot more sort of infrastructure, you're going to pass lots of churches and so on. That can be immensely powerful. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I took from my first Camino. I didn't expect it. I mean, I knew I was walking an ancient Christian pilgrimage, and prior to that it was a pagan pilgrimage path, of course, following the Milky Way. So I knew there could be an element of that, but I didn't really have my head around how much it would impact me. So, and it's quite comical. I mean, my wife Pat, who has walked 2 Caminos with me, is Buddhist by background. I sort of tease her. She almost became a card-carrying Catholic on the Camino. Just that that sense of spirituality was so strong for her. You know, she virtually went into every church. I mean, we don't participate in formal you know, religious ceremonies. We don't go to mass or anything like that. We're not Catholic, but we love going into these old churches. And Pat would go into almost every church and kneel and pray and light candles, and you know, so it's kind of, that's the impact it can have on you. I suppose the challenge is to maintain that once you come home. Sorry, I've rattled on about that one a bit. So the Camino, I suppose my sort of parting comment would be, the Camino is all of those things. You know, it can almost be whatever you want it to be. Can it be a great hike? Yeah, you know, it's a hike in the sense that you are walking across the country, along some beautiful trails. Quite a bit of it is on roads, and you're going through towns and villages, and it's not a hike in the sense that, you know, you've got to be cooking meals and putting up tents and things. You know, so it's kind of glamping from that point of view. You're staying in hostels and going into cafes for meals generally. So it's that. You know, is it a break? Is it time to think? Is it time to refocus and prioritise and heal? Yes, you know, it's that in spades. And can it be a religious and spiritual experience? Absolutely. So that kind of covers the whole thing, I think. Let me just leave you with a bit of a question then. If you are planning your first Camino, what's your motivation for walking it? Why are you going to be walking it? And for those, I know there's lots of you who watch this channel who've walked at least one Camino, and some many, and some very long ones. You know, what were your motivations when you walked your first one, and have they changed since? Let me see if I can answer that question. Why am I going back to walk a 4th one? I think subsequent Caminos are probably a little bit different to first ones. First ones are almost a revelation in a sense, in that you're not really sure what's going to happen, and it can be exciting and energizing, and you know, every day is something new. I find repeating it, you kind of know what's going to happen, but it's still an absolute joy. I mean, you know that you're going to enjoy the open landscapes, and you know, all of that stuff isn't necessarily fresh to you. So why am I walking again, and why am I walking a longer one? I just love the break from the day to day, to get off the treadmill. I lead a very busy life normally, and this is the only way, to be honest, that I've found where I can totally switch off and re-energize. So I love that. And I'm going to do a longer one because I love it so much. I want the experience to last longer. And I'm doing a slightly more remote one because I enjoy an element of solitude while I'm walking as well. So there we go. Why are you walking, or why did you walk? See you next week.